MS directly affects the brain and spinal cord, the command centers of the body, making brain health an important part of managing MS. Welcome to Ask an MS Expert. I'm John Strum, your moderator and host of the Real Talk MS podcast. Each week, Real Talk MS reaches thousands of people in more than 100 countries around the world with the news that people affected by MS need to know. My wife, Jean, lived with progressive MS for 23 years, so I've had a front row seat experiencing all the ways that MS can impact a family. Today, I'll be asking our expert the questions you want answered. MS navigators are here throughout today's live program, answering your questions and connecting you to resources. Living with MS means making brain health a priority. MS can affect memory, attention, and processing speed, but there's a lot you can do to preserve and even improve your brain health. Proactive strategies can help preserve cognitive function and quality of life. Erin Wilkinson is a nurse practitioner in the Multiple Sclerosis Department of the Cleveland Clinic Lou Ruvo Center for Brain Health. Erin is pursuing her Doctor of Nursing Practice degree at the University of Alabama and conducts her own research on brain health and MS. Welcome, nurse practitioner Wilkinson. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me today, John.
Well, I hope you'll start us off by explaining what brain health is and why it's important for someone living with MS.
Yes, of course. So we know MS is a lifelong disease, and brain health becomes such an important factor in maintaining function. Brain health refers to the overall functioning and well-being of the brain. This can be seen in someone's cognitive abilities like memory, concentration, and problem solving. It can affect emotional regulation, which can be changes seen in mood, and the physical brain structure, all which can impact daily life for someone with MS. This concept of brain health and MS really should emphasize preserving cognitive and neurological function. For someone with MS, brain health is especially important because, as we know, MS is a disease that directly affects the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. And with effective disease modifying therapies, rehabilitation, and a healthy lifestyle, we can help individuals maintain overall brain health and a good quality of life.
What did the terms brain atrophy and brain reserve mean in relation to MS?
Yeah, so starting with brain atrophy refers to the loss of brain tissue, which is basically the shrinkage of the brain. In MS, brain atrophy or shrinkage can start to occur during the first year after diagnosis and disease onset, and it becomes an accelerated process for those living with MS. As a provider, we look for brain atrophy as a reliable predictor of future and physical cognitive disability. And when there is whole brain atrophy, there is a correlation seen in cognitive dysfunction and mood disturbances. And looking at brain reserve, we also refer to this as neurological reserve. This is the brain's ability to withstand or cope with damage to continue functioning. I always think of this as like the buffer or the extra capacity the brain has to compensate for injury or disease. Everybody has a baseline reserve. It's unique to the individual, and it's usually prior to MS disease onset. This reserve can be based on several factors. It could be genetics, it could be early life nutrition and lifestyle, medical history, environmental factors, intellectual background can affect reserve, and physical activity. Brain reserve can vary for main reason why individuals that may have a similar MS disease burden may have varying outcomes.
How is neurological reserve impacted both by MS and by aging?
So, neurological reserve is the broad term, and it includes both brain reserve and cognitive reserve. So, when we're looking at neurological or brain reserve, we know this reserve is highest early on in MS. At this time, we can see that the brain can adjust to damage, essentially referring to MS lesions. And this is the reason MS can go undiagnosed early in the disease because the brain's ability to cope with damage. Early on, there can be irreversible damage occurring, and the brain basically uses repair mechanisms to compensate for damage, ultimately at times masking symptoms for someone. The major concern arises when the reserve and repair mechanisms are used up, making compensation harder, and symptoms become more noticeable or permanent with individuals with MS. It really becomes important during this time, early on in the disease diagnosis, to initiate disease modifying therapy if appropriate. And as I like to say, our goal is always to preserve the reserve. And then aging with MS. So when it comes to age, a wild fact for all individuals is that with and without MS, the brain naturally starts to shrink, actually starting at the age 30 to 40, and it increases with each decade of life. This is important to know because aging leads to the gradual loss of neurons and brain volume, even in healthy individuals. So when aging is combined with MS, aging can accelerate the decline of neurological reserve. And at times, older individuals with MS may experience faster progression of disability due to this double impact of age-related and disease-related brain changes. Protection of neurological reserve is done through disease-modifying therapies. Again, being physically and mentally active is so important. A brain-healthy diet, avoidance of smoking and excessive alcohol, properly managing stress and getting adequate sleep, and of course, regular monitoring and conversations with your healthcare team.
Well, I want to circle back to some of the things I just heard you mention, but before I do, I have one more definition to ask you about. Can you tell us what neuroplasticity is and why that's important for someone with MS?
Yeah, so neuroplasticity refers to the brain and spinal cord's remarkable capacity to and ability to reorganize itself by forming and modifying new pathways and strengthening connections in response to damage. Neuroplasticity can occur in several ways. One is the process of the brain generating new neurons. These are the nerve cells responsible for transmitting information, essentially the messengers, and this we refer to as neurogenesis. Second, neuroplasticity can occur through remyelination of the myelin. This is the protective sheath around the nerve fibers, and especially this works better early in the disease, but remyelination can become less efficient, again, with aging and chronic inflammation, and over time we can see it be incomplete or can fail, essentially giving someone MS symptoms. And lastly, through something called functional reorganization, also known as the architecture of the brain, where signals can bypass damaged areas and allow the brain to start using areas that it usually would. So overall, neuroplasticity is important for someone with MS as a key factor on how well the brain copes with damage and can support recovery after relapses. This can help someone maintain physical and cognitive function even when lesions are present. Neuroplasticity can help with rehab. When someone goes to PT or does brain exercises, they're training the brain essentially to find a new way to do things, especially if MS has damaged the usual pathway. When I'm explaining it to patients, I'm usually saying, think of this similarly if a road is blocked. If you live in a big city, you probably have construction all the time. And your brain, if the road is blocked by a lesion, your brain will build a detour to get you where you need to go. Therapy helps your brain build and strengthen those detours. And the more you do it or you use that route, the stronger it becomes. So basically, keep working on the things to improve the neuroplasticity response. And it's important to remember that not all progress is linear. There can be setbacks. There may be challenges completing a task or the inability to do so, but really having that experience is what counts.
How do other health conditions or comorbidities like obesity, diabetes, or heart disease affect brain health?
Yeah, so we refer to comorbidities as any other health condition in addition to MS that someone may have. So comorbidities can be a concern as MS as they can negatively impact brain health and contribute to progression. Patients with one or more comorbidity can have more disability, especially trouble with walking. They can have increased fatigue and pain, increased depression and anxiety, and a decreased quality of life. There's some research that shows individuals who have one or more vascular comorbidity at the time of diagnosis had a worsening ambulatory or what we refer to as walking disability 6 years earlier than those without a vascular comorbidity. It's important for individuals to work with their primary care provider or specialist to manage comorbidities like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, high cholesterol is one, any lung diseases, just to name a few, as this is one of the many ways to help reduce the progression in MS.
Let's talk about some of the strategies and lifestyle changes that someone living with MS can make that are going to improve their brain health. For instance, how does aerobic exercise preserve brain tissue and improve learning and memory?
Yeah, so being active improves cardiovascular fitness. We just talked about those vascular risk factors for progression, and exercise is correlated with maintaining brain volume and cognitive reserve. It can help reduce some of those vascular risk factors. Exercise increases the levels of something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is a protein that supports the growth, survival, and repair of brain cells. This can help improve processing speed. It can help blood flow to the brain. It actually reduces brain atrophy and shrinkage. It stimulates those brain growth factors, helping to protect existing brain cells and encourage the growth of new brain cells. Exercise helps strengthen the connection between brain cells, which is important for learning. And it also supports neuroplasticity, which can improve learning and memory.
So, what are some ways for someone with MS related mobility issues to stay physically active?
Yeah, so we know mobility issues can be a concern in MS, and there's so many ways to stay active even with mobility issues. Really working with a physical therapist or occupational therapist, or even a personal trainer can help find the right exercise plan for each individual. But overall, I always say, gentle walking. You don't have to be running. You can use the support of a mobility aid like a cane or a walker, and that could help someone even do small amounts of walking daily, even if it's in the hallways of their home. And this can help maintain leg strength, and it also helps heart health. There are so many options for chair exercises. Seated yoga and Pilates are great. I love to recommend the use of resistance bands. You can buy them anywhere at the stores or online. And if someone has safe access to a pool, getting in and out of the water can be really beneficial, or a water aerobics class is great. Even seated stationary bikes. I have individuals that get those under the desk ellipticals to strengthen their legs. And the idea really is to start slow, as something is better than nothing, and to know when your body needs rest and rest when needed.
Cornelius tells us he has MS and experiences occasional insomnia. He notices his cognition is worse when he's having a hard time sleeping at night. So, how does inadequate sleep affect our brain health?
Yeah, so inadequate sleep or insomnia can affect brain health in so many ways. It can impair memory, it can impair focus and thinking, because when we sleep, the brain processes and stores information. It's actually working while we're sleeping. And if we're not sleeping, we're not resting. It can affect brain health by reducing the brain's ability to repair itself. Sleep helps support myelin repair, which, as we discussed, is crucial in MS. And besides cognitive challenges, inadequate sleep is closely linked to depression, anxiety, and irritability.
Kelsey says she's curious about those so called brain games and wonders whether they're better than other mental activities like reading or card games.
Yeah, so any brain stimulating activity is important for maintaining brain health. Mental exercise is just as important in MS as physical exercise, but mental exercise can help the brain's function. Brain games are targeted more to really focus on memory, attention, problem solving, that processing speed, and the flexibility of thinking. Brain game examples would be things like puzzles, chess, card games, anything that's really problem solving or increases reaction time. Puzzles would be like Sudoku or matching games. And with smartphones today, there's so many apps available. I'm always learning about new ones from individuals, but some common ones I've seen used are Lumosity, Elevate, Brain HQ, and Peak. And I sometimes have individuals ask about video games, and I think if it is a strategic game and it's making you think and reaction time is fast, by all means, yes, if that's the way to exercise your brain, that's beneficial too. And then maybe learning a new hobby or a new language that really increases brain reserve and brain health. So if someone's been interested in music or painting or crocheting, it's never too late to learn. Remember, it's not about being an expert, but more so the experience.
Can you explain what an anti-inflammatory diet is and how it might benefit brain health?
Yeah, so there are several anti-inflammatory diets out there. A good one we use as a resource is the Mediterranean diet. When someone's really trying to follow an anti-inflammatory diet, there's so much information online about the Mediterranean diet. This diet is rich in fish, whole grains, leafy greens, olive oil, and nuts, just to name a few things. And individuals should really try to have four colorful foods per day. So this can really help decrease inflammation in the body. And nutrition matters in MS and brain health as anti-inflammatory diets support immune function. It boosts energy levels, it enhances brain and nerve function. As I said, reduces inflammation, helps manage MS symptoms, and supports overall health and quality of life. There's so much information out there for recipes on the internet, especially through AI platforms. And I think this helps mixing things up. So you're always creating a variety of options to eat. I always recommend food and meal prepping. This can help with maintaining a good food plan, especially for those on the go or limited time during a busy work week.
Living with the uncertainty of MS can be stressful. What impact does chronic stress have on the brain's memory and cognitive functions?
Yeah, so chronic stress, as we know, can increase cortisol, and this can impact the brain structure and function and lead to cognitive decline, which affects memory, attention, and learning. Stress can also make it harder to concentrate, think clearly, and solve problems. People will describe this as their brain feels foggy or they get easily distracted. Chronic stress can interfere with neuroplasticity, and it also can lead to poor sleep. If someone feels overwhelmed by stress, it's really important to discuss this with their provider so we can figure out the right treatment plan, referrals when needed to counselors or specialists.
When we think about MS care, how would you define a brain health approach to MS care?
Yeah, so the brain health approach really is to preserve neurological reserve and maximize brain health for someone with MS. We look at this through several key pillars, starting with early diagnosis. Early diagnosis can help us get individuals diagnosed earlier on the right treatment plan earlier to help preserve that long time neurological reserve. And then with that early effective treatment, we always look at it as treat early, treat effectively philosophy. The quicker someone's on therapy, the better the long-term outcomes. And through regular effective monitoring. So, how do we do this? Mostly with MRIs. This is the cornerstone for monitoring for subclinical disease, brain atrophy, and suboptimal disease control, kind of leading us to if we need to make a medication change.
How might someone's brain health change over the course of their MS journey from the time they're diagnosed through long-term living with MS?
Yeah, great question. And understanding the changes we discussed in brain health and aging can help individuals make an informed decision about their MS care to really protect their cognition and function and their quality of life over time. We talked about neuroplasticity and brain reserve being better early in the diagnosis. And there is a natural occurring aging process of brain, and the process can be accelerated for those with MS. As aging occurs in MS, there can be a continued gradual brain tissue loss with new symptoms showing up over time, even if relapses are less frequent or none at all. And also, the brain's ability to compensate can start to decline.
Lewis says he knows certain medications can make cognition worse, and he's wondering if his MS disease modifying therapy is either positively or negatively affecting his brain.
So it shouldn't be negatively affecting his brain. As we know, disease modifying therapies have a positive effect on the brain by helping manage the disease. There's so much research of the effectiveness of disease-modifying therapies in reducing relapses, preventing and reducing MS disability, and decreasing the risk of brain atrophy, which improves those long-term outcomes for individuals.
Are there medications that can be taken to improve someone's brain health?
Well, number one is back to disease modifying therapies and talking with an MS specialist if that's, an appropriate route. There are many reasons to be on therapy, and sometimes it may not be the right approach for everyone. So it's an important conversation to have. There are medications that can help with fatigue and focus that are also beneficial. So if you're having fatigue or focus issues, discussing those symptoms with a provider to see which medication may be right. And also, of course, treating depression and anxiety. There's so many medications out there. And if we can work on depression and anxiety, that can also help with sleep and it can improve overall brain health by managing those symptoms. And if sleep is the issue, working with a provider to see if something should be given for sleep to help with that.
Carmen tells us that her mind doesn't feel as sharp when she hasn't spent much time with other people. What role does social interaction play in brain health?
Yeah, so being social and using your brain is so important. Not spending time with others can cause some cognitive setbacks. And family and friends are usually understanding if someone takes more time to get their words out, or maybe their processing speed is slower, so their conversations are a little slower. But still having those conversations and being a part of, family events and events with friends is so important for social interaction and cognition. It supports brain health. It reduces stress. It keeps the mind active. With intellectual stimulation, it can really combat depression. I always mention to individuals to branch out and meet like-minded people that maybe share hobbies, maybe art or crafting. They can attend MS support group in their area or even volunteer just to keep their mind active a few hours a week somewhere to keep improving that brain health. I also like to mention pets because if the circumstance is right for someone with MS and they can adopt a pet, pets can help reduce stress, anxiety, and depression. And whether a cat or a dog or whatever it may be, if it's a dog, they're going to keep you moving. If it's a cat, they're going to keep you playing. So that's also, keeping the mind active too.
So, which healthcare providers should someone with MS work with if they're interested in focusing on their brain health or improving their brain health?
Yeah, so a team-based approach is always ideal for individuals with MS. So recommendation would be, of course, their MS provider. Individuals should work with physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. This can help with cognitive rehab and help restore ways to compensate for cognitive challenges. If available, a referral to a neuropsychologist can be beneficial as they can do a detailed testing of memory, attention, problem solving, and processing speed. And that can help guide cognitive rehab for someone if we can find out where maybe the deficits are. And another recommendation is to address mental health with a mental health provider or specialist to help manage stress, depression, anxiety, or just that adjustment to that initial diagnosis of MS. It's always good to meet with someone. And then, of course, working with primary care or a specialist to address and manage comorbidities to have the best outcomes.
Well, you've shared some important insights about the relationship between brain health and MS. What would you say is the top takeaway that you'd like our viewers to remember and use?
Yeah, so protect your brain early and consistently. Start or stay on disease modifying therapy and combine it with a healthy daily habit like good nutrition, adequate sleep, routine exercise, and stress management. These small choices build long-term brain resilience. And treat your brain like a muscle. Challenge it regularly with mental activities, stay socially connected, and move your body. The more you use it, the more you preserve it.
Well, thanks for being with us today, Nurse Practitioner Wilkinson. Today's program survey has now been posted in the chat for your feedback. Please take a minute and complete it to help us create programs and topics with you in mind. Please be sure to visit the National MS Society's website for information and resources on MS, connection opportunities, and ways for you to get involved. You can also connect with an MS Navigator to receive personalized support by phone, email, or through the Society's website by chat. A recording of today's program will be posted on the MS Society's website at nationalmssociety.org/MSexpert, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. Finally, I'll invite you to join me each week on the Real Talk MS podcast, where we continue the conversation that we start here. You can find Real Talk MS on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Thanks for joining us for Ask an MS Expert. We'll see you next week.